interest in this case began almost immediately, since as a child he attended the services for JFK in Washington. Burnham appeared in the Guilty Men episode of the Man Who Killed Kennedy series on History Channel, where he discussed JFK's Vietnam withdrawal policy and JFK's intent to dismantle the CIA in his second term. He also appeared in the exhumation of Lee Harvey Oswald, the Norton Report on the Discovery Channel, and the infamous grave sites on the Travel Channel. Burnham also appeared in a documentary about the final disposition of JFK's casket, which was aired in 1999, concerning its having been dumped in the ocean in 1966. Burnham is also a founding member of the JFK Research Assassination Forum, and Burnham was the first guest on Leno Sanek's Black Op Radio, and has been also a guest on many radio stations, including KFI Radio in Los Angeles and Radio Liberty, among others, to discuss the JFK case. Greg Burnham.
Good afternoon, everybody. Earlier this year, I underwent a major surgery, thankfully from which I am now almost fully recovered. But last year, when John Judge and I first discussed my coming here to Dallas to speak about the 50th anniversary, I didn't yet know that I was going to have surgery to begin with, and I didn't realize how long it would take to recover. It's been a long haul. And it was only a few months ago that I knew that I'd be able physically to be capable of presenting more of my work. So thanks, John, for having me, and thanks, everybody, for attending. Originally, I was only going to give a long overdue presentation regarding the sabotaged Bay of Pigs invasion. Did I just say sabotaged? I sure did, and that wasn't a mistake. But on second thought, rather than offer up my analysis of an unsuccessful Cuba coup d'etat as though it had occurred in a vacuum, I instead decided to discuss a topic that would incorporate the Bay of Pigs in a manner more suited to the momentous occasion of the 50th anniversary of a successful American coup d'etat. This was much more challenging than presenting my thesis on the sabotaged Bay of Pigs invasion by itself, or for that matter, on Kennedy's strained relationship with his own military, or on his newly evolving civil rights policies. I might get emotional during this, or on the implications of his having offered an olive branch to Nikita Khrushchev, or on his decision to withdraw all troops and personnel from Vietnam by the end of '65. Each of these topics by themselves is worthy of more attention, but just not right now. Those who know me well and are familiar with my work were not terribly surprised to find out that I wasn't even slightly tempted to pursue a genealogical background check on one Lee Harvey Oswald, or to seek to positively identify the so-called three tramps, or definitively rule in or rule out a host of federal agencies, or otherwise engage in a parlor game called I Think I Know Who Done It. But less offensive than that last pursuit, but equally inadequate to this occasion, was the suggestion that I share new evidence of ongoing campaigns to obstruct justice that are still being carried out, both by agencies of the government and by prominent members of the media, some of whom claim to be earnest researchers. But I even passed on that and on them, and that wasn't easy. But you see, ladies and gentlemen, the United States of America was born 237 years ago on the 4th of July, the same day that my daughter was born, in 1776, though. And 50 years later, on November 22nd, '63, it was murdered. It was 187 years old, 4 months and 18 days, and as far as nations go, it was just an infant. In his speech to the United Auto Workers of May 8th, 1962, John F. Kennedy quoted former President Harry Truman when he said, "There are 14 or 15 million Americans who have the resources to have representatives in Washington to protect their interests, and that the interests of the great mass of the other people, the 150 or 160 million, is the responsibility of the President of the United States, and I propose to fulfill it." In the post-World War II America of 1963, the viability of the executive branch of the United States government could have been appropriately defined by how well the above responsibility was met by the President. In order to fulfill his sworn oath to protect, preserve, and defend the Constitution, the President would necessarily take on the responsibility to safeguard the interests delineated in that portion of the Constitution most closely associated with personal freedom, the Bill of Rights. But there is a proper place for a federal government within the context of a democratic republic as laid out in our Constitution. Indeed, there is a necessity for it. Although such necessity is an inevitable consequence of maintaining a union, the undesirable side effects associated with it must be mitigated, else they will threaten to destroy the very liberty for which they were designed to preserve. And arguably, the environment most threatening to liberty exists during times of war, not solely due to the imminent threat of a hostile foreign government, but also because only then are patriotic citizens willing to sacrifice personal freedoms out of perceived necessity. Our founding fathers recognized these challenges to freedom as they were all too evident, because England would have succeeded in regaining control of the 13 colonies unless met with sufficient resistance. Our ability to organize our defenses in a unified manner through a federalization of forces was of paramount importance. And it was from that basic necessity for security that the federal government's existence derives, and it is through perpetration of such a need, now termed national security, that the federal government justifies its continued expansion to this every day. And by logical extension, the prospect of a sustained peace threatened to challenge that expansion in 1963, much as it does today. While it is true that the federal government has taken on countless additional responsibilities since its inception, it is also true that a great number of these are wholly self-serving and without any direct benefit to the interests of the great mass of the other people to whom John Kennedy promised his allegiance. Instead, they serve only the interests of the vast military-industrial complex's unholy union between the Department of Defense and corporate America. As a case in point, during the lame duck period just after Richard Nixon had lost the 1960 election, the CIA, as it is often wont to do, changed course from Eisenhower's plan for peace. This is most demonstrably seen by their having escalated the Bay of Pigs into a full-on amphibious assault and then placing Eisenhower's stamp of approval on it. Yet in an interview with Eisenhower following the Bay of Pigs, he stated unequivocally that he had approved of no such plan. John F. Kennedy inherited, in its then current form, a non-existent Eisenhower amphibious assault plan that had been hatched by the agency and sold to the new president under a fraudulent pretense. Following the Bay of Pigs, Kennedy recognized that he had been bamboozled and took the ship's helm by storm. The ship's course began to be righted, not at first, but gradually. Its captain, having gained sufficient experience, became bold. He refused to invade Cuba both during the Bay of Pigs and during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He pared back the CIA's power by signing National Security Action Memorandums 55, 56, and 57, making the Joint Chiefs of Staff directly responsible to the President for all Cold War operations, basically pulling the teeth of the CIA. He directed the federal government to intervene in states where the civil rights of minorities were most egregiously violated. He signed Executive Order 11110, extricating the United States from the death grip of debt imposed by the Federal Reserve, thus allowing money to be printed directly by the Treasury Department, interest-free. He took a giant leap toward peace during a speech at the American University, where for the first time Americans were challenged not to view the Soviets as a threat, but rather to see the Russians as a people, and vice versa. And on October 11th, 1963, JFK solidified his commitment to peace by signing National Security Action Memorandum 263, ordering all personnel out of Vietnam by the end of '65. And finally, his determination to explore pursuits of mutual benefit with the Soviet Union, beneficial both to the United States and the Soviet Union, is displayed in National Security Action Memorandum 271 of November 12, in which JFK instructs NASA to cooperate with the Soviet Union in outer space matters and joint lunar landing projects. And 10 days later, the enemies of peace acted against him, and the winds of war prevailed. But like I said when I started, the 50th isn't about all that. It's much larger than all that. It's bigger than David Morales, David Atlee Phillips, William Harvey, anti-Castro Cubans, the Mafia, the Warren Commission, the Church Committee, the HSCA, CIA, FBI, NSA, and LBJ. It's bigger than questions surrounding the accuracy of the Mannlicher Carcano rifle, the marksmanship of the suspect, the exact number of shots fired, the changed motorcade route, the magic bullet theory, or the politics of Dallas Mayor Earl Cabell, whose brother General Charles Cabell was fired from the CIA by Kennedy following the Bay of Pigs. The 50th is bigger than questions surrounding the authenticity of the Zapruder film, and bigger than the failure of the Secret Service to protect their charge that day. Indeed, there was more security around Dealey Plaza today than there was 50 years ago. But this is bigger than that, too. The 50th is bigger than H.L. Hunt, Richard Nixon, Clint Murchison, and James Jesus Angleton. It's bigger than Gerald Posner, Bill O'Reilly, Vince Bugliosi, John McAdams, Magda Hassan, David Guyat, Gary Mack, and all the rest of them, and those of their ilk. It's bigger than Vietnam. It's bigger than the Cold War. Indeed, the significance of this anniversary is bigger than both the conspiracy to assassinate John Fitzgerald Kennedy and the conspiracy to cover it up combined. For me, today is not the 50th anniversary of JFK's being murdered at the hands of conspirators, though murdered he was, nor is it about the injustice by which the perpetrators enjoyed impunity, courtesy of a well-orchestrated high-level cover-up. Rather, I am here 50 years later to memorialize that day when a government of, by, and for we the people failed to endure. And I'm here to grieve that failure. The success of a democratic republic, such as ours, depends on the Founding Fathers' concept of three distinct and separate, fully functional branches of government. When one of those branches is rendered impotent, relegated to a position of inferiority, or as in this case, effectively disemboweled, then the system upon which such a republic was anchored will drift aimlessly, directed by the tides and the wind, until someone or something retakes the helm. But since 1963, the helm has been left unclaimed by whoever has occupied the Oval Office. And under the circumstances, you can hardly blame them. But all too often, in the absence of such leadership, the something that has ended up taking over has been war and the war machine. I cannot speak for all researchers, only for myself, and perhaps for some of us who recall John F. Kennedy's words that cold winter day in January of 1961, instructing us to ask ourselves, what can we do for our country? Some of us believe the answer is demonstrated by our commitment to hold government accountable to we the people, as our Constitution informs us is not only our right, but also is our duty. But we are challenged to find a way by which to accomplish it, one that is historically significant, personally meaningful to each of us, responsive to the needs of our fellow citizens, worth passing on to our children and future generations, all the while preventing the positive elements of government, of which many still remain, from perishing. Thomas Paine said, "An army of principles can penetrate where an army of soldiers cannot." What must be accomplished need not be done at the expense of irresponsibility, resulting in riots, lawlessness, or civil war. In short, I'm certainly not seeking revenge. I'm not even seeking justice anymore. There is a plaque at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, that quotes the words of St. John, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." What I seek is truth and the freedom that accompanies it. Absent the truth, freedom's only hope is through a revolution of mind. I want to move on to the Bay of Pigs now, but thank you for indulging me.
He attended the services for JFK in Washington. Burnham appeared in the Guilty Men episode of the Man Who Killed Kennedy series on History Channel, where he discussed JFK's Vietnam withdrawal policy and JFK's intent to dismantle the CIA in his second term. A documentary about the final disposition of JFK's casket, which was aired in 1999, concerning its having been dumped in the ocean in 1966. Burnham is also a founding member of the JFK Research Assassination Forum, and Burnham was the first guest on Leno Sanik's Black Ops. He also appeared in the exhumation of Lee Harvey Oswald, the Norton Report on the Discovery Channel, and the infamous grave sites on the Travel Channel. Burnham also appeared in Adopt Radio and has been also a guest on many radio stations, including KFI Radio in Los Angeles and Radio Liberty, among others, to discuss the JFK case. Greg Burnham. Burnham's interest in this case began almost immediately, since as a child